It's the opening round in the eye of a storm as Cyclone Alfred threatens to wreak havoc on the Queensland coast. The AFL has been forced to postpone its Brisbane-Geelong season opener on Thursday night at the Gabba and Saturday evening's Gold Coast-Essendon encounter at Carrara as Alfred closes in. WA footy fans will have to wait a week for live action, but Dockers diehards won't really mind as they celebrate another long-term signing, with Andrew Brayshaw inking a new contract that ties him to the club till 2031. Fellow midfielder Hayden Young had already become the longest contracted player in the AFL, agreeing to don the purple and white chevron jumper until 2033. Meanwhile, the silly season is officially upon us, with Luke Jackson linked with the return to Melbourne. Fremantle and West Coast pre-seasons are done, the Dockers unveiling prize recruit Shea Bolton and handling the tricky Mandurah wins better than Melbourne in their 19-point win at Rushton Park. The Eagles, with Jack Graham injecting a hard physical edge into the midfield, held off North Melbourne by 2 points in Bunbury in another game affected by blustery wind. The two teams at least got a dress rehearsal for when they return to the Southwest venue in early June. One thing is for certain, the Eagles won't be risk-averse. Coach Andrew McQualter's game style will be attack at all costs and high turnover. To pull it all apart, I'm joined by the West Australian's Craig O'Donoghue. Well, let's start with Cyclone Alfred, Cod, and news from the AFL.
Yeah, it's just come through now as we're recording. So I'll read this, the top of the press release. The AFL has today moved to reschedule Thursday night's opening match between the Brisbane Lions and the Geelong Cats in Brisbane, along with Saturday night's Gold Coast Suns versus Essendon match on the Gold Coast. Out of an abundance of caution and after ongoing communication with the Queensland Government, the Bureau of Meteorology and Stadiums Queensland, the AFL has made the decision now to ensure the health and safety of clubs, players, officials and, importantly, the wider southeastern Queensland and northern New South Wales community. That remains a priority. The AFL will announce the alternate schedule for these matches as soon as possible as we continue to work with clubs and venues on possible scenarios. The rescheduled matches won't be played during the opening round. So those games are off. There'll only be 2 games. That will be the ones in Sydney that we played, and those matches will be pushed back weeks rather than days. That's a pretty smart decision.
I think it's a great decision. It's the only decision they could make. I'll quote Chris Scott here, the idea of getting on a plane and flying into the eye of a cyclone doesn't sound like a great idea. No, it doesn't. And obviously Chris Fagan was very, he urged the AFL before training this morning, you've got to call this off. And I think a couple of days out, smart, well done AFL. Interesting now, so the round 3 bye opens up for the Brisbane game, Brisbane-Geelong game. The interesting one is the Gold Coast-Essendon game. So there was some thought on Sunday night, but you can still have the weather conditions there. So plus that gives them a 5 or 6 days for the Hawthorn game on the Friday night, the Essendon round 1 game. So they're going to have to, show a bit of agility as they did during COVID. So well done the AFL, but I reiterate, why don't we have a full opening round? Call it round 1. You can still open with your Northern States games, Cod, but then roll into the other games. I just think we're going to be left with it. And it's a meteorological thing, so it's not their fault as such, but it's going to be a pretty flat 2 games in the first weekend of footy. Yeah,
well, and a lot of people have said they don't like the way opening round is, and this might be something that forces change into the future. I actually understand why they're doing it. I think that getting the hype in New South Wales,
particularly
and
when the NRL's in Vegas.
Exactly. Yeah. They're taking on a juggernaut like that, and we don't live up there. I lived up there for 14 weeks during COVID, and it is a very different environment. And every time you go to Sydney or Brisbane, you get a reminder that it is a rugby league town. So saying to them, you're special, you're getting the games ahead of everywhere, all of the other traditional states, is good for the code up there. So I can understand why it happens, which I'm more patient with it. And I know a lot of people are around opening round. So if it gives them a breath of fresh air up there and it gives them a chance to become noticed, then I think it works. But I don't think it will work forever. But at the moment, I can see why it's important. But the most important thing now is we saw how windy it was in Bunbury on the weekend. Yeah. Imagine if you add a cyclone to that, what would have done to the standard?
Some of the games on the Goldie, mate, the skill level, it drops off considerably.
Yeah.
So, and it cops a lot of weather on the Gold Coast. So, look, it's the right move. And I'm really pleased that they've made that decision. The last thing you want is a footy team flying into town, or a couple of footy teams flying into town, and a heap of fans going to stadia. It just doesn't make any sense. They need to focus on the recovery after this cyclone hits. So,
and neither stadium, both in the Gold Coast or at Brisbane, are easy to drive to. So you're asking fans to catch a train or a bus into the Gabba, and the train station is a long walk. So then you've got to try and get home, and who knows if that's going to be safe. Who knows how hard it would hit at the time of the game. Gold Coast, there's no trains, so you're catching buses and trams to get around the place, and it takes a long time to get out of the Gold Coast Stadium. So, yeah, I think it's a common sense decision, and it's for safety for everyone, and it wouldn't have been a great game for you to watch no matter what happened. So I think, yeah, this makes perfect sense to push it back and let's just play it when the games look like they're going to be real.
Now, the Hawks, Sydney, Friday night opens the season. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
First time since 1992, I think, that Hawthorns opened the season.
Long time. And all eyes will be on Dean Cox now, won't they? So
they will.
All eyes will be on Dean Cox to see how that game goes. And then GWS get themselves in the spotlight as well. So good opportunity for the Sydney teams to really have an impact on that market as well now.
Now, a bit of local news around COP, but before we get there, I want to talk about the game tipping competition. You could win big on the game this footy season. There's $50,000 up for grabs for the season's top tipper, thanks to Tab Touch, and you could walk away with $1,000 each week as the round's top tipper, thanks to our good friends at Thirsty Camel. Don't have a footy brain? You could win a Mazda BT50 SP just for playing. Wow. So join at thegame.com.au. Now, COD, on the local front, let's start with Andy Brayshaw. He signed a mammoth deal, 2031.
6-year deal.
What is that? So there's a big group of players who have signed long-term with Fremantle. What does it mean, Andy Brayshaw inking that deal today?
Well, it means that they can lock away a lot of their midfield now. So when you consider that they've got Hayden Young all the way through to 2033, and they've got Andrew Brayshaw to 2031, and then you've got Luke Jackson, who was part of the debate over the weekend, and then you've got Sean Darcy, Caleb Sarong through to 2027. They'll be looking to get him done next. Just gives them a chance to build around this group. Josh Tracy, Jai Amos, others who they've got. So they're
Cox, Darcy, Tracy, 2030. Amos, Jackson, Bolton, 2029. Walker, Clark, 2028. Sarong, Luke Ryan, Heath Chapman, Draper, 2027. So they're significant. There's key forwards, there's key defenders, there's intercept kings. So it's great.
Yeah, and they can now, they've got the money that they can work around, knowing what that will look like for other players. They know where the holes are in their list for a long way forward, which is why they've gone Bolton and why they're interested in Pickett, and why they needed to bring Jordan Clark in, and why they had to bring Luke Jackson in, and why they want to get Chad Warner as that big body midfielder. And they now know that Brayshaw and Sarong, who are their co-vice captains, are going to be with them. Oh, Sarong's got to get locked away beyond 2027, but Brayshaw's going to be there in that midfield with Hayden Young until after 2030. So it's a great deal for him to have. He wanted to sign it before the season. He's played 146 games.
Yes.
This means that he will get close to 300 as part of this deal. He may even get to 300. There's a possibility of that because it's 6 years on top of this one. So that's 7 years in total. So he could get to 300 games under this, and you'd think even if he doesn't that he would get there into the future. So great part of the midfield, important signing for them, and important to get it done now as well.
The Cosy Pickett noise is very loud, and I note that Brad Green, the Melbourne president, is asking for 3 first-rounders. Good luck for that, Brad, but you're entitled to go ambit claim if the player's in contract, so I have no issue with him saying that. The Luke Jackson one's interesting. For me, it sounds like one-way traffic. So the language from Luke, or certainly from Justin Longmuir, who spoke to Luke after that Channel 7 report, I think it's absolutely there'd be Melbourne clubs, and particularly the Demons, who'd be interested in Luke Jackson, but whether he's interested in returning to Victoria is another question.
It's always interesting when the phrase clubs believe they are gettable, which is different to the player is thinking about moving, or the player has put off contract talks. I think it's been a masterful display by Melbourne over the past few days.
Yeah.
They've been a club under pressure for everyone wants to leave. Petrarca wants to leave. Oliver wants to leave. Pickett wants to leave. All of a sudden, Brad Green goes up there and says, no. And he talks to everyone and says, no, 3 first-round picks. And then suddenly, Melbourne are being mentioned as Luke Jackson might be coming to them. And the report drops at half-time of the game against Fremantle on a time where Pickett's only flying over here to play a quarter and then spend the rest of the week with his family in WA. Suddenly, no one's talking about Cossie Pickett leaving Melbourne or Petrarca or Oliver. What they might have thought they were going to maybe be down at halftime and were worried about that. So ideal opportunity to put some talking points out there. Now, clubs may genuinely feel they can get Luke Jackson, but regardless of whether they think it or not, I thought it was a really clever weekend for Melbourne to change the narrative about themselves. We're keeping Pickett unless you want to give us something, and we might go and get Luke Jackson.
There was a lot of language around Pickett only playing the quarter, but of course he is suspended for the first few opening rounds, so they're just getting a little bit of match practice in.
No point taking the match practice off somebody else who can play in round one when he's not allowed to play for the first 3 weeks.
Now, Cod, you're one-on-one with Fremantle coach Justin Longmuir at the weekend, gave some fascinating insights into the mind of the man who we hope will be the first premiership coach at the Dockers. There was a lot of stuff about the rolling employment contract, et cetera, et cetera. What did you take out of it?
I took a lot from it because it's the most open I've heard him speak. We sat down for 40 minutes and he was really giving on elements of his life, which I haven't heard him speak about before. And I put to him that everyone thinks you're conservative, everyone thinks you're defensive. And I said, what's your reaction? And he said, I understand why people think I'm conservative because I choose not to give much of myself away, but I'm not. And then he gave a really good answer about the defensive side of things, saying, our handball stats are super high. That wouldn't be the case if I wanted us to be defensive. Maybe we haven't scored as much because we haven't had the skill to hit targets inside 50 when we've gone quickly. But we'll hopefully be better at that this year. They've improved their scoring every single year. I took it that he took offence to you're a defensive coach side of things.
I got that last year.
Yeah.
He was at pains to point that out a couple of times. I don't know where this no handballing comes from with the third highest handball team. I also liked his reference to where they're trying to force the turnovers. So a lot higher.
So I interviewed him on Friday and then go to the game over the weekend. And what I found really interesting was he talked about how hard it is to move quickly when the player with the footy there's no one behind him. He's looking through 35 blokes. So then I watched, when they get the ball in that situation or there's 32 blokes in front of them or whatever, how they move the ball, and that was when they were slow. And how did they move the ball when it was an opportunity to be quicker and they might maybe have 8 players behind them and it's a halfback? Then they went like there was no man. They went like the clappers at that point. They didn't have any concern at all. So that was interesting to hear him speak about what their philosophy was, when you go slow, when you go quick, and then say, okay, that's actually what they're doing. How he explained it is precisely what they did. And they went through the middle a lot with Jordan Clark. When they got the ball in an area where they didn't have too many people in front of them. So having heard him explain, I can understand why they're very slow at points and then they'll go quickly at points, but they're not going to take stupid risks when there's no one behind them who can help with the defence. That's when they'll go a lot slower and work their way through it in that passage. So I thought it was a really good explanation from him and gave a good insight into how he's thinking. But I think there's no doubt that they're going to try to score more. And we saw that on the weekend with scoring more than 100 points.
I also liked him talking about the no excuses policy from last year. So I think, as you pointed out, 10 games last year where the two teams were separated by 12 points or less in time on in the last quarter. So they won 2, lost 7, drew 1. Let's just have a grab of what he said to you about the no excuses.
First message when they came back was just have an acceptance of where we're at. Not footy club who makes excuses. I mentioned that we had injuries once. You can use that as an excuse. Just use it as data to help guide our pre-season and help us get better. And been really impressed by the way the players have embraced that and got to work. We've tried to put players in those situations where we've scored a lot more of our drills. We've tried to put them in those situations where they're actually competing at training and having to not only execute their own roles, but execute their leadership, their communication and their problem solving, their mental game, and execute, at the end of games.
I like that. No Tracy, no Pearce, no Darcy towards the back end of last year. The last 4 games they lost, they win one of those. They're playing finals. So it was, I thought it was really honest and refreshing from Justin Longmuir.
Yeah, so like no excuses for the players because they would have heard it all off season. We were unlucky. If only we had had these blokes available, it would have been different. And then no. We had the chance to win those games and we didn't. So you need to improve, and you need to improve specifically in those close games. So I love the fact that suddenly pre-season became every single training session, there was a game of some sort where there were points on the scoreboard and you either win or you lose. And I think that's what players love because it puts them under pressure, and we see how players handle that pressure, and we see the competitive instincts come out, and they have to be better in those situations this year because Collingwood won a flag, didn't they, by winning the close ones.
Yeah.
They made it an art form, and Fremantle made an art form out of stuffing up every opportunity that they had, didn't they? So, and you can go through all of them over the course of the year, from Sharp missing the shot against Collingwood in the draw when they had 15 seconds or so to go in the game, and Sarong had a shot against Port Adelaide and he missed, and there was the clearance against Essendon when scores were level and they allowed them to get out there, and Jordan Clark yelling at an umpire, and you can keep on going through them all. Bailey Banfield gives away a 50-metre penalty against GWS and Jesse Hogan seals the game. So you just keep going and going and going, and that's what cost them. And he said, no excuses. We were there we had the chance to win. We didn't. So I love that he didn't say, we're so close. Oh, if we didn't have a few injuries. No, you guys have to improve. That's a great standard to set from the moment you start training.
As discussed last week, the squeeze is on. So Sonny Walters, good performance at the weekend, 3 goals, full of energy. Nat Fyfe yet to play, still managing that knee issue, but expected to put his hand up early in the season, if not round 1. Let's have another grab from Longmuir on the management of Fyfe and Walters.
Yeah, hopefully, we sit back at the end of the year and both of them say that they were handled respectfully, because I want to give them every opportunity, but there's going to be some aspects of management given the pre-seasons they've had, where their body's at, and some of that stuff's hard to lay out at the start of pre-season. So just make sure that my lines of communication are really open and honest with them, and they get a say in aspects of it, and we navigate the length of the season. Yeah, because it is demanding. Maybe there was an opportunity last year to give Fyfe a rest or a couple of weeks off, and maybe his body might have hit the line a little bit better. And I just want to be really open with him and make sure that we manage him throughout the year in a way that's respectful, but also giving them and us the best opportunity to perform.
Took from that very much a part of his plans.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I actually asked him specifically, does that mean take 3 or 4 weeks off during the year, not travel to certain away games, even go back and play some games in the Waffle? And he said, we don't have a plan at the moment for what that actually looks like, because we need to have that discussion once we know when Nat Fyfe is available to return. But it's obvious that they want to look after him, and they want to look after Sonny as well, because they both got injured at different points last year, or were sore at different points last year. And there's no point them getting through and potentially playing finals and going really deep, and those two guys being banged up. Let's face it, they're the fairy tale that you can hang a theme around for the entire final series and stuff. So, and they've got some challenges. When you look at the fixture, round 5, April 13 against Richmond in South Australia for gather round. 6 days later, they play Melbourne. So you're not going to want to have too many guys that age coming in off a 6-day break. Then they've got another 6-day break after that before they play against Adelaide at Optus Stadium. Then they have a 7-day break, then another 6-day break. So that passage there from rounds 5 to 9 is going to be brutal on blokes like Fyfe and Walters. So they've got to be game on, game off, realistically. You can't expect them to play there. And then you think about trips to the Gold Coast, trips to Sydney, trips to Marvel Stadium where injuries occur for older guys. Sonny Walters did a hamstring there last year, and Walters and Fyfe's been injured there in the past. I think that'll be the look at it. What's good for your body? Do you need to fly to the Gold Coast? Probably not. We'll look after you, and you can play 3 games in a row in Perth, including that North Melbourne stanza, and there's a bye around that Gold Coast game as well. So I like the way that they'll talk about things. Kevin Sheedy once talked about wanting to sign James Hird to like a 12 to 15 game contract, saying we're going to. What if we signed you up for another year and said, here's 15 games, you're not allowed to play any more than that, and that way we can't pick you. And it never happened. But I think that's an interesting philosophy if you say this is the maximum number of games we'll pick you for, to make sure you get through the home and away season. A bit like the management of some players in the NBA these days, but only for older guys. What do you reckon about something like that?
I wouldn't have it in a contract, but I certainly understand the delicate need for a balance. I think with Fyfe and Walters, absolutely. You want them road trips, 6-day breaks. You've got to be careful about that. Important to have time in your own bed too, which most Melbourne teams get more of. So I think you do employ that but not contractually. I
No.
don't think you can get to a point where it's a 12 to 15 game contract. I'm not surprised that came out of the mouth of Kevin Sheedy, though.
Geelong have done it really, really well in recent years, especially when you look at the way they handled Patrick Dangerfield and Joel Selwood in their premiership year. They bring them off the bench at different points and having a rest and just managing them really, really well. So come September, they were okay. And I think the idea of Nat Fyfe playing 20 games of footy
It's not going to happen.
Just seems silly. And allow him to be out there fresh when other players aren't fresh, and then he can use all of his strengths better. I don't see him. He shouldn't play round one because he hasn't done a pre-season. I wouldn't have him playing round two either. And then maybe bring him in for the Derby. And then, as I say, get him through to that round 5 game, week off. And then play that round 7 game, week off. And just work your way through that to make sure that you've got the experience out there in that midfield.
What did you take out of the practice match? We'll start with the Dockers. We'll get into the Eagles in a moment. But so a interesting game against Melbourne. Great to see Clayton Oliver and great to see Christian Petracca out there and performing for Melbourne too. I think both are going to have influential seasons. So well done for the Ds for that. That sets them up nicely. I'm a bit of a loss about what they're going to do in the ruck. So Liam Reid, he had the opportunity. Got a bit of a masterclass from Max Gawn, let's be honest, in ruck craft and positioning around the field, etc. Went forward, had the opportunity to clunk a few and didn't. So I'm just not sure. They probably need to play a ruckman, don't they?
Yes. So going up against Max Gawn, good luck when you're Liam
Yeah,
Reid.
well, you're not going to play against Max Gawn every week.
No. So one of the other things I put to Justin Longmuir was, are you committed to 2 ruckmen? And he said, we're committed to 4 talls. So whether that's 2 ruckmen and 3 tall forwards, or 2 ruckmen and 2 tall forwards, or 3 forwards and 1 ruck, he said, we're going to play 4 talls. So that the only other option if you don't play Liam Reid is to play Pat Voss alongside Tracy and Amos, and then all of a sudden you've got Jackson as your number 1 ruckman. I'm not sure how that looks for them either. Jackson's clearly the better ruckman out of the 2. He gives them a different look when he goes in there. His ability to win the ball at ground level, he's dynamic. I thought he was really good. He kicked 2 goals. So I think they need to reassess whether you replace Sean Darcy with Liam Reid all the time and leave Jackson in his same role, or say, no, Jackson, you're the number 1 ruckman when Darcy isn't here, and we'll work things around that. And I think that'll be the challenge for them until Darcy comes back, how they handle Luke Jackson.
I'm going to start with Reedy as the number 1 ruck. That's what I'm going to do in round 1, and you go from there. We're not sure how soon we're going to get Darcy back, but when he does return, it's going to solve that issue.
And it's Geelong as well, who don't play a traditional dominant ruckman. So that gives them an opportunity to not necessarily have to worry about a Max Gawn type early.
The Freo forward line looked very different with Shea Bolton in there. I loved his debut in purple against another AFL team. Has made a career out of getting forward of the footy. So he's going to be really dangerous deep. He's going to be really dangerous high. He's going to be able to go through that midfield and light them up. I thought he gave them everything we expected him to and would want.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The first goal that he kicked from that tap from Luke Jackson, we haven't seen that sort of a goal from them in the past. That's one where they've had to work really, really hard to create
the
goals.
clever sort of crumbing goals.
Yeah, that's what he's good at. And then he got forward to take a mark, kick another goal. And there was one where the ball was on the boundary line and he slapped it back into play, and they got the ball back and went through a few sets of hands, and they got a mark inside 50 as a result of that.
Also, the give to Jackson late, really clever hand.
Creative and thinking and stuff. So I like the way he's doing that. He had the most score involvements of anyone on the field. There is absolutely no doubt that he's going to be a dynamic player for them. He went into the centre square as well. It's interesting how short that centre square looked, though, I thought, given Petrarca and Oliver and stuff in there, they were playing so well. I think when you got Bolton in there with Sarong and Brayshaw, it's not a tall midfield at all.
So Driscoll was in there at times.
Yeah, I like that with him in there. And when Johnson was in there, he was tall as well. So until they get Young and Fyfe back, it's a very short midfield. When they put Murphy Reid in, it was even shorter. So they've got some challenges there in working out how they get that mixed together, I think.
O'Driscoll certainly put his hand up for
round 1. He was great, wasn't he?
He was really good. And I love the penetration with the foot too. Sometimes a little bit errant with it, but I think he gives them plenty. He's real X factor about him, O'Driscoll. I keep thinking he's the Stewie Dew in the grand final. It kicks you 3 1/4.
Look at the Hawthorn supporter of you. But you're right. You're absolutely right.
So Jager so you got Sharp on one wing. I think you start with O'Driscoll on the other. Fair?
Yeah, and I think I just will go inside
Yeah.
a bit as well in that centre square because once again he's tall but I just think the explosion that he gives you is so important because that's what every single team's looking for. The Patrick Dangerfield, the Dustin Martin, the Isaac Rankin sort of players who can get the ball inside, congestion, Nick Dacos and just charge forward, Jordan De Goey, all these sorts of blokes. If you don't have one of them, then you're not going to be able to really penetrate from clearance. And that player isn't Caleb Sarong and it isn't Andrew Brayshaw. It has been Hayden Young for them, but he's not available at the moment. So I love what they're going to get by bringing O'Driscoll into that team.
Murphy Reed's an interesting one. So he's on the line ball for round one. I thought early turnover, but from that point on, he's pretty clean. I like the way he uses the footy, and he doesn't fumble too much. So I think he's going to be a player. It's just whether they're ready to play him at this stage.
Yeah, I don't think he's a midfielder yet. There were some signs which worried me from a midfield perspective for a young kid coming into the AFL because everyone looks around and goes, I haven't played against adults before. So you can get a little bit jumpy in that way. He received a handball from Jackson in the middle in the first quarter and fumbled it because he was looking up at the guy coming towards him. And then he had a similar one in the second quarter where he just got rid of it rather than absorbing the tackle and things like that. He was on Petrarca for a little bit, and Petrarca won just a dominant clearance from the centre square because he wasn't aware of what was going on around him. Then he had Clayton Oliver at one point, and the same thing happened there. So
great learnings for him, though.
Yeah, great learnings. But short, young midfielder, not what AFL footy's about. I love what he does below his knees. Like his ability to pick the ball up cleanly below his knees makes him a forward, I think. If you can put him in the forward line, I think he can really set up some blokes around him. So I think that's where he's going to come in maybe as a sub playing forward. Yeah. But I think Justin Longmuir said after the game that there is a lot for him to learn from it. There was some good and some bad. I think the midfield party would have gone, nah, probably not. But forward line, I think that's where he's going to be suited for at the moment.
Did we see enough to merit top 4, do you think, this year?
I don't think we've seen enough of anyone yet to know. Yeah, but what we know is their list is strong and deep.
Yeah, deep is the key.
And they've got 13 games at home. And as we talked about last week, they go Richmond in gather round away. So that's a win everyone expects to get straight away. So if you, rather than playing Richmond here and just taking it as one of your home wins, you add it to the list of away wins. They get St Kilda away as well. They're not expected to be strong.
I reckon you'd add Richmond to an away win if that were the G anyway. But
but the point, regardless, you want to play Richmond away because it's an away win, as opposed to playing them at home where you're expected to win all your games. So it just adds on top of all of your home games. So I think those Richmond and St Kilda games away are ones you should be ticking off or penciling in as a Freo fan, along with your home ones. So I think that gives them 14 to 15 wins when you look at it that way if you take care of home and then win those 2 away. And you might drop some here and there that you shouldn't, but those numbers alone say they should be around top 4,
Let's talk about the Eagles down in Bunbury against North Melbourne. So they'll be matching up there in early June. Found a way to win, which was good. Wins are always important for a squad that's developing, I think. I like Jack Graham in the midfield. Just gives them a physical presence. And when Elliot Yeo comes back, I think that'll really help someone like a Harley Reid, having those two around him. Liam Baker slotted seamlessly into half back. He's bought in. I mean, and it's a different game style. I think on the evidence we've seen so far, it's going to be a quicker brand. So it'll be a squad. They're going to probably jag some unexpected wins and win and lose some they're expected to win. I think they'll at least be having a crack, and it'll be a bit more of an exciting brand.
It'll be an exciting brand of footy. There's no doubt about that. It'll be a high risk, high turnover style of footy. Like they're going to get burnt really, really badly on turnover because they're playing a low possession style of game. So they only had 256 possessions for the game. North Melbourne had 366. That's what Richmond did when they were good. So Richmond were ranked 15th, 14th, 11th and 12th for average disposals throughout 2017 and 2020. So they didn't get a lot of the ball. They tapped it on and they just got it and they just hacked it forward in any way they could. And we saw a lot of that on the weekend as well. It didn't matter whether there was anyone there. We're kicking it in that direction. Get there when you can, please. It's the philosophy around just getting the ground as much as you can. So I meant that they were going to turn over the ball a lot. They turned it over 61 times to 45. Marks were 61 to 104. The scores were 16 to 24. The inside 50s were 36 to 43. So there's a lot. Those figures, you go, ooh, this could be messy. But as they learn how to play it, they'll get better at it. But at the start of the year, I reckon there's going to be some times where West Coast fans are going, oh my God, what happened there?
Matt Flynn starts in the ruck, right?
Well, you've got to have an experienced body there, don't you? Yeah. The second ruck's going to be really interesting.
Well,
isn't
so
it?
does Bailey Williams play? Does Archer Reid done enough to start forward and go into that second ruck role?
Well, that's the question that they're going to have to figure out. Bailey Williams has been an important part of this team for the past few years. Has barely missed a game.
I like him as part of the 23. I really do.
And I think you want to start strongly, don't you? You don't want to put a bunch of kids out there early and get blown away by putting too many kids out there. So he's 19 years of age, Archer Reid, and hasn't played a game yet. So they're already going to have a lot of inexperience out there. The question is, how inexperienced do you go early, knowing that they've had some floggings, these guys, over the past couple of years and need confidence? Do you subscribe to the theory of get experience in, hold the fort, teach these young guys as much as you can, and then when you get through to the mid-range point of the season, then start throwing the kids in more? Or do you go all in kids now and see what happens?
Oh, not all in. You've got to find a balance. So Bo Allen I think will start in round 1. So he's making his AFL debut. At this stage, I'm saying Bailey Williams ahead of Archer Reid. But I can see Archer Reid forcing his way into that side. I really like him. I'm a big fan. So I thought Jack Williams probably missed an opportunity too at the weekend. I really liked his build last year. He's got a way to go. But yeah, that. I'd be erring a little bit more conservative. I still want to play the kids, but you've got to find the balance, because at what point does the lesson become invaluable if it's just a thumping?
Well, that's the thing. I was looking at earlier. So Bo Allen we expect to play. Yep. No games, 19 years of age. Archer Reid versus Bailey Williams. If Reid plays, it's another person in the team. Yep. No games, 19 years of age. Harley Reid, 19 years old. Obviously plays more like an actual adult rather than a teenager.
And still not, building.
Yeah, building. Was angry again on the weekend. Didn't touch the footy much. Fought a lot of people and stuff. Hopefully that part of him is gone for the home and away season. He just goes and chases the ball. But he's still another 19-year-old. Ruben Jinby's 20. Noah Long's 20. Tyrell Dewar is 20 and has played 7 games. We think Elijah Hewitt will get his body right this year and play. He's 20 and has played 7 games. He's 20, he's played 14 games. Then you got Jack Hutchinson, who's played 7 games, even though he's 23. So there's a lot of guys who will be in this group who are inexperienced and will be looking at each other going, well, what do we do now? And that's where you need Liam Baker, and that's where you need Jack Graham and Matt Owies, who have come into this team and say, let's all just calm the hell down and go and do what we've been told to do at quarter time.
So Owies comes into that team. So does Cripps play?
Yeah, he's on the absolute edge. I wouldn't be surprised if he's in at the start of the year, and then it's if you get 2 or 3 weeks to prove to the coach that your role is valuable, and because we know that he's not necessarily the goal scorer, he's the running up and back sort of player. So and they're going to want Matt Owies to score goals. They're going to want Noah Long to score goals. So Cripps' chance is to say, I'm different. I can do the running side of the game, but he's one who is absolutely right on the edge of in or out, and I think he'll be that way for the entire year. I don't think he's a guaranteed player anymore. Adam Simpson loved him and was always going to look after him as a premiership player.
He didn't let him down too often.
Yeah. So and Simpson always went with the approach, they haven't let me down, so why wouldn't I give them more opportunities? But with a new coach, you haven't let the new coach down, or you haven't performed well for the new coach, performed poorly for the new coach yet either. So he's got a bit of work to do, I reckon. There'll be a lot of competition for those small forward spots.
Well, Brockman's the other one too. Yeah. So Noah Long you mentioned. We got Jaden Hunt on one wing. Who's on the other? Is it Dewar? Is it Hutchinson? How are we going for round 1?
I've loved Hutchinson's aggression.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this team really needs. Like when he tackles people, he hurts people. And that's great. Everyone needs someone who's going to just say, bugger you. When I grab you, I'm going to slam you into the ground. You're going to know about it. And it lifts everyone around him. I think...
Well, Jack Graham gives you that as well.
Yeah, but your unsociable Hawks over the years. Like you need people to look around and go, do I really want to take this bloke on? And right now, I'm not sure anyone would want to take Jack Hutchinson on. You'd love that style of footy, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, absolutely. I do love that style of footy. I think you find a spot for him on the bench. I think he gives them something. And he's going to take Mark of the Year at some stage.
He's exciting.
He is, isn't he?
And you need that sort of excitement in your team. So you talk about that versus Jamie Cripps. You've got the excitement of duo, what might he be, what might he become, or he could turn it over, or he could create some magic versus I know what Cripps will give me, but his ceiling at the moment of what he might do in a game is lower than what the duo might do to create a goal or create some magic here or there. So it's the consistency of what you know versus what someone might become and what they just might do out of nowhere.
We were speaking about the forward line before. Of course, Oscar Allen missed the game due to a family wedding, but Jake Waterman, he's going to hit the ground running again, clearly, from his performance at the weekend. Oscar obviously goes back into that team. So, all of a sudden we're starting to – there's a little bit of depth there around the fringes, which is really good. At the other end, Cod, they're going to get plenty of action in defence, let's be honest, the Eagles this year. Harry Edwards looked pretty solid against Nick Larkey, I thought.
Yeah, he's looked good every time he's played footy, I reckon. Like, he's always been that guy you go, oh, it's not going to be a disaster if he plays, as opposed to most young key backs where you go, oh, this could be a hard day for them. But with McGovern and him, they've worked well together, and he worked well with Barris when McGovern was out as well in the past. So he just looks like a player, and he's been around long enough now that he's grown up and has a mature body around him. So, and would understand all pre-season that it's his spot to lose. So I think he's one who will come into the team and feel like he belongs and won't feel threatened that if he has one or two bad games and he's going to be out straight away. He should think, this is my spot.
Well, you're the number 2 key defender, aren't you now?
Yeah.
So, and I think with Hoff, outstanding talent. Obviously, you've got Baker back there, you've got Jinby back there. Cole's the interesting one.
Experienced, again, you know what you're going to get from him. But yeah, he has been around for a long time now, and he's able to just do a job for them. But will there be someone else who comes along throughout the season and says, I can give you something a little bit different? Bo Allen will be in that mix as well, as we talked about. So, yeah, and they're going to get injuries along the way also. So they're going to have to work through that. But the challenge for the backline is going to be they're going to lose the inside 50 counts most weeks. And the opposition going to have a lot of the ball because, as we said, this is going to be a low possession team that's taking high risk. And that will be frustrating on the defenders more than anyone.
Can I always get excited at this time because it's Thirsty Camel mailbag time. And this week we'll be giving away a $50 digital voucher thanks to Thirsty Camel. We'll do that on Thursday. Get your questions in to TheWestSport at wanews.com.au. Please include your mobile number at the bottom of your email as we will send you a digital voucher if you're a weekly winner. This week's special cod, Great Northern Super Crisp Stubbies, only $54.99 a carton. Spend $20 or more for your chance to win a trip to the Magic Round. So, Cod, I have a bit of mail here. This one from Michelle, our good friend Michelle. High Quarters, could you please give some examples of the third-party deals that football identities have and explain the nuances of them? We'll take a bit of effort to do that. Look, bottom line is you're allowed to have third-party deals. There's additional service agreements. It's quite complicated, but they have to be ticked off by the AFL. So, but at the moment... I can give you some examples of where they've raised. At the moment, there's some eyebrows raised up at the Gold Coast. So the AFL is looking into it. So the coach, Damien Hardwick's partner, Alexandra Crowe, has been employed as a consultant on consumer and commercial strategy. So whenever it's a player on the list or a coach at that club, they have to look at it. So they'll be looking at that. Geelong, when signed Bailey Smith, there was question marks there because he's a brand ambassador for Cotton On. Cotton On is a sponsor of the Geelong club. I guess where it gets murky, he's a social influencer. So how do you put a value on what he does on his social media in terms of Cotton On? So it's where it gets really tricky for the AFL. But they look at all this stuff. You'll remember Chris Judd and Visey reportedly getting paid $250,000 for a couple of skills sessions. Kurt Tippett, remember Kurt Tippett?
Yep.
$60,000. McMahon Services and Balfour's Bakery, who were sponsors of the Crows at the time. That was to keep him in Adelaide. So there are lots of examples of this. I think Geelong, the AFL looked at the Geelong coach, Chris Scott, who had a role with Morris Finance, who is a sponsor of the club, and that now has to be included in the soft cap. So there's some examples of it. It's a really tricky area, but the AFL does look into it. Some
more basic ones that I think people see all the time. If we look at as opposed to the ones that people find controversial. The really basic ones will be this year. If you look at, we'll have columns in the West every single week with one from Michael Walters, one from Jeremy McGovern. So they'll be obviously paid to do those, and that's a third-party deal as well, but they're being paid by us rather than being paid by Fremantle. So and there's other media outlets that do similar sorts of deals as well. So they're looking at it and saying, are you getting money from a media outlet or from a clothing company because they sponsor the club and they're trying to help you out. And so when there are big dollars involved, that's where the questions are raised. But the majority of them are smaller dollars from a football perspective, where players are doing a little bit extra on the side to help with their profile and to help with their own bank balance afterwards. So that's the main example of third-party deals. The controversial ones are the big dollar ones, which you're talking about, where people go, hang on, have they only signed on because they got that deal on top of that? And was that known in advance it was going to be the case? So suddenly you're earning more money. And Harley Reid has had some great third-party deals recently.
He has, indeed.
He's an ambassador for the NBL at the moment for their final series. He was an ambassador.
Herdsman Growers Market.
He was with the Caulfield Cup as an ambassador as well. So these are the sort of things. Extra money on top of what you're already earning. When it's clear, like the NBL's got nothing to do with West Coast, if it was one of West Coast's major sponsors, then the question would be asked.
It's a different world now to the days when Dermot Brereton put the tip-top loaves of tip-top bread in the Premiership Cup.
Wasn't
Do you remember that?
Crazy? That was just a little bit silly. Bloody Hawthorn.
This one from our good friend Steve from Sorrento. Good to have you back, Steve. Try and keep your emails a little bit shorter, though. Hello, Quarters. It's great to hear your voice again. Firstly, because I love listening to your dulcet tones. Very nice. Thank you, Steve. But more importantly, because it means that footy is back at long last. So I'll praise you this letter a little bit. I'm just about out of Bush Chook Stubby. So here's my first contribution for the season, Cod. North Melbourne is committing fraud by selling 2 home games to the WA teams for the next few years. In any normal season, North would be playing one of the Eagles or Dockers at home and the other away. Because of the lopsided draw, they will, of course, have an additional game against either of them every few years, which would alternate between being home or away. So, in short, they will not be allowed to profit and therefore keep a non-viable club going, when in most seasons they would not have 2 home games to sell to WA-based clubs. I don't mind it, to be honest, with the North situation. I think when you are a club that has had assistance from the AFL, and North has been, very much at the top of that list, I think you do what you're told. And I think for them going out to source additional revenue, I don't mind it at all. And it obviously helps to alleviate the burden of travel on the WA teams.
Yeah, so North were going to sell these games to Tasmania anyway, and what they've done is realised that Tasmania is now going to have their own team, so the market there for them isn't going to create as much interest or create as much money for them either, so they're coming over here. I hate the fact that clubs travel and play home games away, because it means that they're probably not going to win and that their bank balance is desperate for that money, and they're feeling like they have to do it. So from a football perspective, it's bad for the team like North Melbourne. We see Melbourne take games to Traeger Park in Alice Springs. We've seen teams over the years that have travelled to a whole range of places. Hawthorn are still playing games.
Been doing it for decades
as well.
Down in Tassie, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're playing it at a venue where you get a home ground advantage, it can change. But I really don't like the fact from a football perspective, there is no doubt this year that Fremantle are going to get a massive advantage on the competition by having the extra game here. And that teams will arc up over that later on in the year.
Well, yeah, but offset by the imbalance of travel.
Yeah, it's offset by, and that's where the argument lies. So it's Melbourne last year lost to Fremantle in Alice Springs. Would they have lost to them at the MCG? Would have been the question that we would have had to ask of Simon Goodwin, because it would have been in the middle of the winter and it might have been wet and it changes the conditions. So ideally, everyone plays at their home ground, and then they play away games at an away ground. And your home fans get to see it. But the reality for some teams is that they can't, and North Melbourne have made a smart financial decision to travel and pay and get money to play away, and the 2 WA teams have absolutely capitalised on it, and good on them.
Thanks, Cod.
No worries. Thirsty Camel, thank you.